Good morning, everyone. And we studied today the portion of Vayera. I studied from selections from the Likutei Sichos, the first talk of the Rabbi. The topic of our discussion is circumcision. This week's Torah portion, Vayera, we read about God's commandment to Abraham and his entire household to circumcise themselves for what purpose? As a covenant between God and Abraham and his family. Tell us the Torah be'etzem hayom hazeh, in the middle of the day, right away. He was 99 years old. Nothing deterred him, and immediately he went and circumcised himself, as well as Ishmael, his son. He only had one son. The Torah mentioned Ishmael, and all his servants who were in his house had to circumcise themselves.
Eliezer also.
And Eliezer. But Eliezer is not mentioned in the Torah, because Eliezer is a servant. And a year later, we read about a child that's born to Sarah and Abraham, and they name him Yitzchak, as God commanded Sarah. And Yitzchak, the Torah tells us, to circumcise at when? At the 8th day, the proper time. As the Torah says, every child should be circumcised the 8th day. The Medrash quotes an argument between Ishmael and Yitzchak. Who is greater? Who is closer to God? Let me read. The Medrash relates that Yitzchak and Ishmael contended with each other when they were young. Ishmael argued, I am more beloved than you because I was circumcised when I was 13 years old. Yitzchak countered, I am more beloved than you because I was circumcised at 8 days. So each one felt that they were great, their deed was greater than the other. You have two brothers, not same mom, but same dad. One at 13, the other is at 8. And one says, I'm greater because my sacrifice, my covenant, when I did it with God, I was 13. The other one says, no, I'm greater because I did at 8. The Rabbi says, I don't understand. What's the greatness of being circumcised the 8th days? The reason Ishmael, who was circumcised at 13, saw himself as more beloved is easily understood. As the Medrash states, Ishmael boasted, I had the opportunity to object, but I didn't. However, we need to understand why Yitzchak claimed that being circumcised at 8 days was a reason to be cherished more. Some commentators have explained that the virtue of being circumcised at 8 days is that fulfilling a mitzvah at its prescribed time is preferable, and the time for circumcision is when a child is 8 days old. So in other words, I understand why Ishmael is greater, because he has a choice. He can say no, nobody can stop him. And he chose to be circumcised. Yitzchak had no choice. He was 8 days old. In fact, he was crying. We're not sure that he agreed. So what is it that he says, oh, I'm greater than because I did it at 8? So the commentators explain, because 8 days is the appropriate time. As the Torah tells us, God says, from now on, 8 days is the time. But therefore, he fulfilled the mitzvah in the right time, the first one, and he's greater than Ishmael. The Rebbe is asking 3 questions. Number 1, Ishmael was commanded when? When he was 13. He did it on time. You cannot say that Ishmael did not do it on the right time. Only future generations were commanded to do it at 8 days, but not Ishmael and Abraham. Abraham was 99. So there is nothing lacking about not doing it on the right time. That's question number 1. Ali, you understand that? Question number 2, ask the Rebbe. We know, the Medrash tells us, anybody knows the day that Abraham was circumcised?
Yom Kippur, I would say Nisan.
Yom Kippur is the time. Now, the Jewish law is that Meila Bizmana, if a child has to be circumcised in the right time, in appropriate time, then it pushes off a holiday and Shabbat, even though it's a labor. You fix a person to be incomplete. You're not allowed to do labor on Shabbat, but because God gave us a set day, 8 days, then you're allowed to do it. The same as Yom Kippur. Some people would have a circumcision on Yom Kippur. You can't have the meal until the night because you have to fast, but you do circumcision at the right time. What if the child, you could not circumcise him at the 8th day? Either he was far away, he was anemic, there was no moil, there are many reasons. Then it does not push away Shabbat and holiday. So if the child is already 10 days old and you want to circumcise him, you can do it on Shabbat, you do it on Sunday, Monday, and the rest of the week. Yom Kippur, you cannot circumcise someone unless it's the right time. And we see that Abraham kept the entire Torah, yet when God told him to circumcise himself, we know it was Yom Kippur. Must be, it was the right time. In other words, not only the first question the Rebbe says, what do you mean it's not in the right time? God told him to do it and that's when he did it, so for him it was the right time. We have proof for it, because if it's not the right time for Abraham and Ishmael, how come he can do it on Yom Kippur?
The footnote, Rabbi, says it would have been the first day of Pesach.
Okay, because it could be a first day of Pesach.
In any case, it had to be done that day.
Right, which is Yom Kippur. That's the medrash.
I understand what's important.
Even your first day of Pesach is a holiday.
Right, because on Yom Kippur, you can't do anything. You have wine, so you gotta give it to young kid.
In addition, the Rebbe is asking a third question. The timing, whether it's done at the right time, which is 8 days, or not at the right time, is a small technical detail. For Yitzchak to tell Ishmael that he is greater than Ishmael just because it was done at the right time makes no sense. Because the timing is a detail in the mitzvah. The idea is to be circumcised. And circumcision is done 13 days, 13 years, 99, 8 days. It's a circumcision, it's a covenant with God. The fact that it was done at the right time doesn't make sense for Yitzchak to say, I'm greater than you in the performance of the mitzvah because I did it that day. Doesn't make sense. Did you understand the question? In addition, the Medrash is listing different mitzvot that our forefathers added. And the Gemara says that God gave Adam, here it is. This distinction
Where are you reading?
on page 167 at the bottom, before. Therefore, says the Rebbe, being circumcised on time changes the whole idea of what circumcision is about. It's not just a detail about the timing. This distinction is also reflected in our sage's statement. Adam, the first man, was commanded regarding 7 mitzvot. Adam, God gave him 7 commandments. For Noah was added the prohibition against eating a limb from a living animal. Not to be an 8th one, but I guess another one was taken away. Abraham, that's the Medrash. The Medrash says, God gave Adam how many commandments? 7. One of them is not to eat from the tree of knowledge. It didn't apply anymore to Noah. Noah, God added another mitzvah, not to be cruel to animal, not to rip apart an animal and consume. You have to kill the animal, the soul should leave the body. Abraham was commanded regarding circumcision, and Yitzchak inaugurated circumcision while 8 days old. For Yitzchak was the first to be circumcised while 8 days old. So what do we see from here? That Abraham and Yitzchak have both received the originality, the first to be circumcised. Abraham, because God gave him the mitzvah first time. And then we say, no, Yitzchak is the first to be doing it at 8 days. I don't understand. If it's just a technical detail that he fulfilled it the time God wanted it to be, should not be credited to Yitzchak. From that, we see that the circumcision Abraham did is one type of circumcision, and that includes Ishmael. Circumcision that Yitzchak did at 8 days old is a whole different circumcision. And that's why the Medrash says, Adam, 7. Noah, another one. Abraham, circumcision. Yitzchak, circumcision on 8 days. Because even though it's the same act, the same covenant, the same idea with God, yet it's totally separate commandments, and it has a whole different understanding.
Adam was born circumcised.
What?
Adam was created circumcised.
That's according to the Medrash.
Okay.
Yes.
But for example, there was no circumcision while the Jews were in the desert. You were wandering the desert.
The Levites did, and God did not allow them to leave Egypt until they were circumcised, and God did not allow them to enter the Holy Land until they were circumcised. And Moshe did not circumcise his son Eliezer, and he almost died. It was a covenant, but it's in this regard, for lack of better words, it's immaterial, because we circumcise due to the mitzvah that God gave us on Mount Sinai. Every mitzvah that was
That's what I
given
was going to ask.
prior,
If the timing was important, it would have been done right after Mount Sinai.
it was done. Before they left Egypt, they had to be circumcised.
I thought that they didn't circumcise while they were in the desert, all the children that were born in the desert.
Before they left Egypt, God says, "Ve'arel zachar," someone who is uncircumcised cannot partake in the Paschal offering, on the Pesach offering, and therefore they will not leave Egypt. Moshe went and cooked and grilled Paschal offering, and it had the aroma of heaven, and they all got so excited over that they wanted it, so they agreed to circumcise themselves. Matan Torah was only 49 days later, so they were all circumcised. Then they stopped circumcising themselves for whatever reason, except the Levite tribe. They always circumcise themselves. Yehoshua was from the tribe of Joseph. When he becomes a leader, after Moshe dies, he's taking them towards Jericho, towards the Holy Land. And then he says, before you enter, we need to do a Passover celebration with a circumcision, because no one can partake in the Passover sacrifice before. And Moshe, as Joshua said, shame that we did not do a Passover sacrifice for the entire 39. They didn't do it. Now we have to do it before we. And the next day, by the way, they crossed the valley. On Passover, the second day of Passover, that's when they crossed the valley into the Holy Land. Circumcision had to be done, but that's a command from God. Just a minute. Did I address it? Yeah, the next day.
They got circumcised the next day. They crossed
The
it.
mom stayed with the babies and the dads. What?
Okay.
At the time, those who were in this army, most of them were circumcised. Also, they were strong, brave men.
The people who left Egypt circumcised did not have to circumcise themselves the second time when they brought into Jericho. One of the ones who were not circumcised, but some
Right.
the entire time.
Of course.
So they were not.
And who were the ones that were over the age of 60? Only the Levite tribe, right?
Nobody else survived.
Except Caleb ben Yefuneh, and that's it. Adniel ben Knas, there were very few men. And Yoshua, of course. Says the Rebbe, the fact that the Medrash assigned credit to Adam's 7 commandments, Noah an extra one, Abraham circumcision, Yitzchak circumcision on 8 days, it means that circumcision that Abraham and Ishmael did is one kind, and the circumcision that Yitzchak did is another kind. And it's not just one small detail of 8 days. Says the Rebbe, one might ask, why does the Medrash divide the commandment of circumcision into 2 aspects? A, the fundamental command given to Abraham, and B, its inauguration at 8 days through Yitzchak. And why is the fact that one dimension was added because of Yitzchak, that circumcision be carried out when a child is 8 days old, sufficient to refer to him as the one who inaugurated the mitzvah of circumcision? Says the Rebbe, from here we see that the idea of being circumcised at 8 days must be a great trait, something that is penetrating the essence of what circumcision is all about. Here is the Rebbe's explain. Did anybody remember we studied it before?
Yeah.
We did, so that might be maybe 5 years ago. Says the Rebbe, you can better understand the above by focusing on the intent of circumcision, which is, as stated, my covenant will be in your flesh as an eternal covenant. Circumcision establishes an eternal bond between each Jewish male and God. What's the purpose of circumcision? An eternal bond in between God and the male. What circumcision accomplishes can be understood by drawing a comparison to a covenant established between 2 close friends. When friends want to ensure that their friendship will endure without any fact or situation disturbing it, they strengthened and intensified their connection by establishing a covenant. What is a covenant? We want to make a pact that will always be there for one another. And we make a covenant. That's what covenant is about, that it will never be broken. No matter what I said, no matter what I do, no matter that I did not attend your wedding, no matter I didn't help you when you were at a need, I have a covenant with you. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, when a covenant is established between two people, since they are created beings and therefore subject to change, it is possible that the covenant will be broken. When by contrast, God establishes a covenant with a Jew through the Jew being circumcised, the covenant is eternal. It is not subject to change. Says Rabbi, when you have a covenant with God, what do we call the covenant? Brit Olam. Olam means forever. In Yiddish, Abik. Abik is forever, meaning it's a covenant that for the rest of the existence of humanity and the universe. It can be established only from God's point of view, because I'm a human being. I can be here today and I can be gone tomorrow. I can change my mind. I can change my heart. Even if we do a covenant. How many times people say to me, I give you my word, just like a covenant, and a year later they change their mind. Why? Because we are all human beings. But when it comes to a covenant with God, it's called Brit Olam. Why? Because God establishes a covenant, and that covenant will endure forever. In other words, no matter how far we go from God and how angry God gets because of our conduct, it does not affect or impact the covenant. Says the Rebbe, therefore, this is one of the reasons why Abraham did not circumcise himself until God commanded him. Although he observed the entire Torah before it was given, Abraham waited until God commanded him to perform this mitzvah because a created being cannot bring about an eternal covenant, since he and any covenant he establishes is subject to change. A bond that is everlasting can only be accomplished through the unlimited power of the Creator. He who declares and thereby empowers that my covenant will be an eternal covenant. Now we can understand, Abraham kept all the Torah mitzvot. How come he didn't circumcise himself? It's one of the 613 commandments. The answer is the idea of a covenant with God, Brit, is an eternal covenant. He couldn't do that. It's beyond his pay grade. A human being cannot do an eternal. Therefore, he had to wait for God to say, I want you to circumcise because I will make an eternal covenant. And therefore, he couldn't do it earlier. Now, says the Rebbe, only now can we understand why the timing of the bris is when an infant is at the tender age of 8 days. At that age, the child about to be circumcised is certainly too young to do anything by his own power to actively participate in the performance of the mitzvah. Says the Rebbe, when a person hopes to achieve something with his own power, he needs to prepare over time until he is ready and able to accomplish that goal. In contrast, the covenant that is established through the mitzvah of circumcision is brought about entirely by the Creator. Man plays no role in bringing it about. Now we understand why this mitzvah is 8 days. You can ask, a child is not obligated to keep the Torah mitzvot. A child is studying Torah before Bar Mitzvah as part of education. A child is praying. A child is eating matzah. A child is doing a bracha on the lulav and in the sukkah, eating in the sukkah. A girl is making Shabbat candles. It's all part of education. Yet there is a mitzvah that is obligatory to be done when they are only 8 days. They are minor. Says the Rebbe, that's the only reason is because this covenant is an eternal covenant. An eternal covenant cannot have an interference of a human. If you put a human DNA into this covenant, it's not going to be eternal. Therefore, as early as the child is capable, after 8 days, we know that the child is healthy enough to sustain that procedure. Earlier than that, it's too dangerous. Therefore, we wait for the moment it is a child is able to be able to participate, not by doing any prep, not by giving an agreement, not by actively doing anything, because everything is done from God's point of view. And therefore, That's a complete circumcision. Says the Rebbe, now as somebody is getting impatient.
Point, Rabbi.
Yeah. Yes,
We wait 8 days to make sure the child is viable.
right.
But also because we won't have to pass one Shabbat.
It should pass one Shabbat.
Okay, it's-
Well, that's a medrash, but it's not a prerequisite. Because if that's a prerequisite, you can say do it after Shabbat or do it on Shabbat. And in fact, you have a child that's born on Shabbat and you do it
Shabbat.
next Shabbat.
Maybe,
Huh?
maybe.
If it's on time, right?
Huh?
It's
Says the Rebbe, when it was about Abraham, he had to do all the prep work for 99 years old to dedicate himself. God had tested him in many ways. After he had done all the preparation, now he's called Tamim perfect. And therefore God says, now it's time for me to do a covenant with you. But once it comes to Yitzchak, it's a whole different ballgame. God wants to make a covenant before he had an opportunity to have any say. There is no questioning the child. There is no assistance from the child because that will interfere with the everlasting covenant. And says the Rebbe, I think the rabbi says, yeah, and I think that this is the gateway into serving God. The rabbi is not talking about it here. This is the gateway that assists us in getting connected to God. When I do a mitzvah, I have to know that my bond with God is not common sense, not based on common sense. It is a blessing by God. If I base my serving of God based on common sense, then it's a questionable bond. Because as soon as it doesn't make sense, I don't serve God. And therefore, God's going to say, when it doesn't make sense for me, somebody else can serve me better. Perhaps, I should dedicate and divert the resources. Because God was kind enough to establish a circumcision that is everlasting, therefore, if I choose or if I miss or if I don't do it as well as I should or somebody else can do it better, it doesn't take away from the connection between us and God is always there for us. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.